Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach, and I'm excited to talk to you today about some things that you can do to try to improve your chance of getting in and get scholarships. So we have an exciting agenda today. I'll give you a brief overview of my company, myself, just so you have a sense of who we are. If you haven't been able to watch any other GMAT Club YouTube videos or seen videos on our own site, then we'll hear from some former clients. We'll have one video from a client to talk about her experiences. Then we'll talk about some tips and things you can do to improve the profile. Then we'll have a clip with me interviewing a couple former clients, which is very exciting, and I've got some great feedback on. And then we'll go back to some more tips and tricks for how to make yourself as strong as you can be. So thanks for staying with us. And if you have to drop off at any time, my email is scott@personalmbacoach.com. Feel free to reach out with any thoughts or questions. So a little bit about us, top-ranked U.S. consultant. Last year, I've been invited to speak at the annual GMAT conference in the past with all the admissions directors. Overall, as a company, we have a 96% success rate, and our clients got in with over $6.5 million in scholarships last year and over $1 million in Forte fellowships. This year, we're trending a little bit higher. So we had about $3.5 million in round one, and we'll see what happens. Results are coming out now. So, this week we've had results. We're sort of going through and congratulating folks and sending thank yous. And so, we'll see how everything comes together. We're a boutique family operated business. I run it with my sister. Everybody works here 7 days a week. And so that's really important when it comes down to editing. I know some places do Monday to Friday editing, but by doing 7 days, you're getting things back pretty quickly. And everybody that works with us will get one-on-one support, either from myself, the founder, or a former M7 admissions director. We have a project management system and clients to network with at all of the top schools. And so a little bit about myself: went to MIT for undergrad, worked in consulting for a few years, and then went to Wharton for my MBA. And I'm on the board for AGAC. That's the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. For those of you not familiar with that, and we'll actually have an applicant fair coming up soon. So definitely watch for that if you'd like. I'm joined by MJ Shores, former Wharton and UCLA admissions director who served on a number of boards, including GMAT, Forte, and MBA Tour. Both MJ and I have been featured in numerous publications. And then I run the company with my sister, Erin, who's a former Bain consultant, a Forte scholar, and her MBA from Yale. Manages the whole editing process, manages our editors, who all have PhDs in English or writing, masters in journalism or higher. And we'll get into more about what we do and how we can help you shortly. But just real briefly, we do everything from early planning, if you want to think through how you can improve your profile between now and when you're ready to apply. I was just talking with an early planning client this morning. So what extracurriculars should you do? How should you improve your profile? What activities do you need to get involved in? Are you in the right job? GMAT and GRE and executive assessment tutoring. We have in-house software that you can use to guide through the sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers, full-length exams. The only thing with tutoring I would say is we're extremely tight. So if you have any interest in tutoring and you're watching this now, definitely reach out. Many time slots we're already full. And so we can definitely talk about how we might be able to help you there. And then the whole application process, which we'll get into towards the end, as far as developing your story, talking through the essays. We have essay guides for every school, samples of essays, and a pretty robust process. And we know the admissions directors quite well because I'm traveling around the world and giving talks on applying to schools, pretty closely networked with admissions directors. And so our clients do really well. So, for those of you who are planning to apply in 2022, here's a little bit of a timeline. If you're watching this video late, you're like, it's not March anymore. But if you're watching this today, here we are. So it's March. You want to be getting things started. Now, some things that are a little bit different this year. We have essay brainstorming starts in April. We started earlier. So we have a lot of clients that are underway now in March. We're working on essays for round one. We're brainstorming essays, we're writing essays, and we're editing them. It's definitely not too soon to get started. We decided this year to get started a little bit earlier, just to give people some extra time. But certainly things like, story development, rec letter planning, resume, essays, those are the things that we'll be talking about today in a little bit of detail. Okay. So we're going to go and share a video now from a former client to talk a little bit about her experiences for a few minutes, and then we'll come back to the presentation.
Each essay, it took all the guesswork out of crafting my essays, which I really appreciated. I worked with Personal MBA Coach and Scott in this most recent admissions cycle, and I found them to be incredibly helpful during my whole admissions process. Starting from the beginning, just helping me to define a list of schools that was both challenging and realistic was really key for me. I think that, even though I knew what my kind of resume was, I think having someone who knew a ton about all the different programs really helped me define a list that was challenging and realistic. Additionally, working with someone who has so much expertise in all the programs, I was able to learn more about all the different MBA programs and define a list of schools that actually worked for my personality and would have, an enjoyable experience for 2 years. I came in with a good sense of my story and why I wanted to go and get my MBA, but Scott really helped me flesh it out and, most importantly, tailor it to each school, and really provided a sanity check to make sure that I wasn't going off track. The materials provided to create my essays were super clear, telling you exactly what each school is looking for in each essay. It took all the guesswork out of crafting my essays, which I really appreciated. And when we were going back and forth reviewing, there was no limit to how much we could review it. We worked together to make sure it was as good as it can be. And it really helped me to organize myself and make sure that things were done well ahead of time, because I really hate being at a deadline, being stressed. So that really was a relief for me. When I was lucky enough to interview, the interview prep helped me get a number of reps in with individuals who were specialized in the programs that I was interviewing with. So I felt really comfortable going into my interviews. There weren't any questions in my interviews that I was really surprised about. And during the interview prep sessions, I always got really clear feedback on how to improve specific answers. So whenever I was leaving my interviews, I did feel really confident. I had a lot of really great options at the end of the application cycle, but I chose Chicago Booth with a really generous scholarship package. So, and I think that, working with Scott and Personal MBA Coach really just made the process a lot less stressful for me and really made me feel confident and really, really excited for this fall. Thanks.
Okay, great. So moving along now, now we're going to go into some tips, right? So what things can you be doing to improve yourself now? As you develop your application strategy, really 3 main questions you want to focus on. 1, why do you want the MBA? 2, what will you do with your MBA? And 3, what makes you a compelling candidate? Now, of course, you'll have more questions than this, but these are 3 things that we'll be talking about today. So why do you want an MBA, and how is it going to help? You really need a strong reason. And often people say, well, I'm going to advance my career and learn more leadership skills and do better at my job and maybe get a new job. Is that enough? Is that too boring? You want to think about the fact that you don't want to check the box. You want to have specific reasons, but at the end of the day, it needs to make sense, for you more than anything else. And these are some successes. We have videos on our website, honestly, but they didn't quite play in this platform. And so you can feel free to visit our website for some other client testimonials. But this is Sid, who got into Harvard with an MBA MS. And this is Jimmy, who got into Wharton Booth and London Business School. So potential questions to ask yourself, right? Do you want to close any knowledge or skills gaps? If so, which ones? How will you close these gaps on campus? Are there certain courses that you need to take? Are there professional clubs or executive speaker series you need to get involved in order to really obtain this knowledge? Are there leadership skills that you need to gain? And how are you going to get these skills? Now, everybody's different. So it's not as simple as saying, I want to learn corporate strategy with Professor Siegelco at Wharton so that I can be a better consultant. That might be you, or it might not be you. Being very detailed about what you need to get and how the school will help you is going to be very important. Next, ask yourself what you want to actually do with this MBA. So, determining goals is a very crucial part of the self-discovery process. What industry do you hope to enter? Are there certain target companies that you want to join? What role do you want to have? Sometimes applicants come to me and they say, quote, I don't really know what I want to do post-MBA. And that's fine. Most people don't know what they want to do, honestly. And even once we finish this process, over 80% of people change their minds. But you have to have a specific plan going into it. And to be able to detail how your short-term goals will help you to achieve your long-term goals is exciting and interesting and very helpful. If you don't know what to do and you want help getting motivation and figuring it out, that's something that consultants can definitely help you with. And if you're not hiring a consultant, find someone that actually knows a lot about you, can sort of guide you through this. Again, here's another video. We're not showing this one. We're showing different videos just from a technical standpoint. But here's another client that got into Wharton, MIT Sloan, Booth, and Yale. And if you want to learn about her experiences with us, visit our website. These videos are all on personalmbacoach.com. So as you brainstorm, think about goals that are specific, achievable, logical, and really a good fit for you. When it comes to goals, there's no bonus point that's given for a goal that's like really interesting or really different or really unique. What happens when admissions directors look at goals, and we talk about this internally with our former M7 admissions directors, they really just see, is it something that can happen? Can Scott accomplish this? Is Scott coming from, I don't know, doing operations consulting and wanting to say, to go into venture capital, right? That's not really achievable, to be honest, right? So have something that's specific, achievable, and logical, and makes a lot of sense for you. We have a separate top 10 pitfalls talk that's on this GMAT Club YouTube channel, and it's also on our website, and I give it in many cities around the world. Sometimes we talk about goals there and how logical they should be. So definitely something to think about. If you're not sure whether your plan is real, definitely get some outside guidance. Next, develop what makes you a unique candidate. Questions to ask yourself: what is unique about your background? What beliefs do you share? Do you have any personal significant stories that you wanted to talk about? Maybe hobbies, what are things that you value in life? As you think through some of these questions, you might think, oh, this is boring. Let me click to log off. Don't click off yet, because you'll watch a very exciting video shortly. But also, some of these are relevant for you and some of these might not be relevant. So figuring out which of these are important for you is important. You're not going to write an essay on all of these, but just to think through what things about you want to highlight. And if it's your goals, if it's your work experience, maybe that's what we cover. When it comes to themes, I'll go over maybe a couple slides on themes, and then after a couple slides, we're going to jump back to a video where I'll be interviewing a couple of former clients, and then we'll jump back to the presentation. So your theme must appear in multiple aspects of your application. It's not something that's just the personal stuff. It has to really appear in multiple different aspects. It has to be relevant to your essay topics. This is probably the most important bullet here, because sometimes people have a great theme and a story that feels really, really strong, but then they're writing an essay for a school that doesn't ask anything personal. And if it's a professional essay, then it doesn't matter that you have this really strong personal theme. So don't try to force fit yourself into the questions. And lastly, it has to be ownable. So whatever your theme is, definitely stand behind it. Some past examples of themes: maybe someone's talking about a hobby, career aspirations, family background or circumstance. Let's say healthcare is important, and you have witnessed family members going through some tough health situations, especially over the last couple of years. I'm sure there unfortunately has been a lot of those. Maybe you've reflected on the industry and the country that you're in and what you want to do to change that. And you're going to get a job in consulting within healthcare so you can revitalize XYZ and start bringing better healthcare to certain markets, right? So this is just an example. Perhaps people talk about volunteer work or a personal loss or tragedy as a particular theme example. Themes to avoid: being hardworking, studying, having commitment, right? These are things that are not super exciting from a theme standpoint. Okay, so now we'll go on to the next video, and then we'll come back to the presentation shortly.
If you think about sports and you think about like helping other people and being passionate about people, that can manifest itself in different ways. Like one, it's just mentorship, telling people that they need to, be better, helping people to think through themselves. And then you can also have the thought process behind it. How do people think? How do people want to think? Can you help them to think a little bit better? And so we actually, kind of use those different themes together, even though it feels like it might not be super business school focused. And then we connected people to the consulting goals. And what we did was, in this case, this applicant didn't have a ton of work experience relative to some others, closer to 3 than 4. And so we focused a lot on the leadership roles and specifically what we did as a leader at the firm and outside of the firm to try to offset some of that lower years of work experience. And this is actually our most successful client last year based on numbers alone. You guys are also equally successful, but got into all 6 schools that this applicant applied to at $550,000 in scholarships. So before we go into success story 3, thoughts, Parker, if you want to start to kick it off, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and a couple-minute overview of your experience going through the process with us, and to what extent you want to talk about your own personal story as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Scott. Happy to chat a little bit about my background and experience with you guys. So talking a little bit about my background, I graduated from Caltech in 2018 with a BS in physics, and I pivoted to consulting and worked in the public sector with Deloitte and the State Department for 2 years, bringing analytics to the policy process. And this was, I think, a similar background to a lot of applicants, but also different insofar as it was consulting, but it was public sector, and it was more STEM oriented than business or econ oriented. So business school was something that really hadn't been on my radar as an undergrad, and it was something that had only now eked its way into my consciousness, a year or 2 after having left undergrad. So I was originally planning to apply now this current fall. So I reached out to Scott in February to start having a conversation about things I could maybe do over the summer to prepare. But as we all know, the world is a very tumultuous place. And as a result, COVID struck, and Scott got back to me and he said, you know what, you should probably just apply right now, round 3. And that, in my opinion, was probably one of the most valuable pieces of advice I could have gotten, because it ended up putting me here at Wharton, and B, Scott had this incredible ability to understand the way that the entire process was going to change and evolve. And the value of that advice to me was just immeasurable. So talking a little bit about the actual tactical things that we worked on in the application process, I would say that there were 3 key components. Number 1, he helped me to refine that unique value proposition that I mentioned before. How do I translate Caltech physics and public sector consulting at the State Department into a story that makes sense for business schools? So I can maybe go back and chat a little bit about that if some more questions come up there. But turning it into a story was very important. And, secondly, taking that story and tailoring it specifically to the different factors and facets that each school wanted, because each school has, very different priorities, and tuning that story to resonate with each school and with each, panel of admissions people that were going to be looking at it, I think is also extremely important. And last but not least, the interview prep, extremely important. And it was great to connect with a lot of other clients of Scott's, because they're all, equally highly motivated people that really, we'd really push each other to prepare as effectively as possible for the interviews, especially the Wharton group interview. And another client of Scott's who I practiced for the Wharton group interview with ended up getting accepted as well. And he and I remained good friends. So a few, I think, takeaways from this whole experience for me. Number 1, earlier is better. If I hadn't reached out to Scott in February thinking that I was going to be starting this process in the fall, I would have missed this window entirely. So the earlier you get involved with Scott, the better. You can have more time to think about your story, more time to work on your GMAT, more time to adapt your strategy based on changing global circumstances. Earlier is absolutely better. Takeaway number 2, just the advice, the feedback, and the confidence that I got from Scott were absolutely worth it, both in terms of improving my application and improving the way I felt about myself and the way I felt about my application. Because without that preparation, I don't think I would have had the confidence to perform as well and come across as strongly as I could have and should have. And finally, and I think most importantly, Scott really acts as a force multiplier. So taking what you put in, multiplying that effort in terms of what you get out. But if you go in and you expect Scott, hey, please write my applications for me, please turn me into a good interviewer and produce a good story for me, it's just not going to happen. It's really on you to do 99% of the work, and on Scott to look at your work and say, this is what you need to change in order to be as effective as you need to be. So it's certainly a big leap in terms of effort and responsibility on your end as a client, but something that was absolutely worth the effort. So with that, I'm happy to pass it off or take any questions.
Great. Well, Parker, thanks so much. Really appreciate the kind words here. So we do have one question here. So from Mohammed. And I'll show this here. How do you combine your Caltech experience with work experience and made a cohesive story for business school? Yeah. So I guess maybe you can just talk for another 30, 60 seconds kind of about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually hoping someone was going to ask about this because it was a really fun exercise to do. I knew that the Caltech background was something that was going to be unique for business schools because I think there are actually 3 other people at Wharton currently from Caltech, which is a lot more than I thought there were going to be. But tuning that in a way that made sense to admissions officers was key. And I think the way I was able to achieve this was combining it with my work experience to tell a story about why I needed an MBA in order to make the most of that background. And the angle I ended up pursuing was talking about my goal of becoming a chief data officer. If any of you guys are familiar with the role of a chief data officer, it's essentially a new sort of emerging C-suite position where you have an executive, at a high level who's in charge of like data and analytics for the organization. As organizations become more data driven, it becomes more important to have these types of people in these types of positions, rather than the sort of geriatric executive stereotype that I think a lot of us think of. And this was something that was a perfect fit for my background because, it was clear that Caltech physics gives you a good grasp of STEM concepts and analytics. It was clear that the work I did implementing analytics at the State Department and working with their chief data officer exposed me to that role, made me interested and excited about it, and revealed to me the importance of that role and the effect that I could have in that role. And, it made telling that story very natural and very effective and very well suited for an MBA and for, the value that I would get out of the MBA. Because I think a lot of the importance of the story is telling them why they need to accept you and why you need the education that they provide. And I think it would have been a lot weaker if I said, yeah, I'd like to go into private equity just like everyone else. Check, please. That might have had some element of truth in it, but I don't think it would have been nearly as effective. So just finding those elements in your background that resonate with you and resonate, presumably with the admissions office, I think will dramatically enhance your chances of, success moving down the line.
Super helpful. Thank you so much. And on goals, I know we're not talking about goals today, but also for all the watchers here, you can ask any questions that you want on anything. We talk about a lot of different things in other webinars. Goals are super important, and you don't need to be aggressive in the goals. As Parker said, yes, you can write about venture capital or private equity if you want to, but guess what? It's probably not going to help you to get accepted. And so we often find that tough balance between writing something that's going to feel really, really good for you, and then also going to get you accepted. So we'll go to the next success story, and then we'll come to Jamie afterwards. So here's another applicant, an Indian female, internationally from outside the US. 730 GMAT, 3 years of work experience and working in trading, sales and trading type of a role. So what was a challenge? Well, scholarships, right? So scholarships were important, at least getting some sort of money, not necessarily the most money, because we wanted a high school, but at least some sort of money, with kind of average test scores, lighter extracurriculars and limited experience in just 3 years. If anyone wants to talk about really not having much, really not having much experience at all, you can ask something to Parker, who had even lower. But still, 3 is kind of a little bit on the lighter side. So extracurriculars, so we were a STEM major, a lot of focus on healthcare. So here's a picture of, some kind of volunteering in a hospital. The goals are healthcare consulting. And, we had some experiences with like gaps in the healthcare system. So in this case, we did tie together the personal experiences with the professional story, which, I'm using some examples of times when people did that. Not that you have to do that every time, but it makes for a more interesting story to tell. So if you have questions on how to do this, if your stories don't align, let me know. I can tell you about mine, which my personal and professional stories had nothing to do with each other. So what else do we do? We talked about the future career and like passionate about the future career with the thought around the career switch. So why are we switching from like sales and trading to a non-sales and trading kind of role. And then we also focused on the willingness to lead here despite being underrepresented. So what we meant by this is, here is somebody who, let's say, was not part of the most common group of traders as far as what she looked like or where she was from, but still had a leadership role, and talked about how she developed that leadership in an environment that didn't really have a lot of people in support above her. And so what was the final result? We got into Chicago booth and Michigan with over 160,000 and combined scholarships here. And a couple things to note before we go on to Jamie is, this is a challenging year, right? And so for those of you who are applying now and thinking of submitting in round 2, first of all, it's not too late. So Parker said to start early, which is absolutely the right advice. It is. But if you're listening to this today and you're applying in round 2, you can't start early, but it's not too late. And Jamie can talk a little bit about her timeline maybe. It's definitely not too late. We can still help you. But, just kind of know, it's a little bit brighter there. Just be realistic about the expectations, right? It is a challenging year. Application numbers are up. More people are applying, and the numbers are raising faster than schools are adding any seats, even for those schools that are adding seats. So, just kind of keep that in mind. So Jamie, maybe I'll let you talk for like a couple minutes or so. Nothing too crazy about your background, and as much detail as you want to give us about your experiences, and then we'll go back to some questions, and we'll go back to other success stories.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. So my name is Jamie. I am a first year at Wharton as well. A little bit about my background. So went to Notre Dame for undergrad, majored in economics and accounting. From there, much like many of the people you'll hear on these calls, I went into consulting. I was at McKinsey for 2 years, doing mostly work in the healthcare space. I did a lot of growth strategy work, org redesign, things like that for major healthcare providers. From there, I decided to take an externship at SoftBank for a year, where I worked on the human capital team, working with portfolio companies on a variety of talent-related issues, operational issues, things like that. From there, I came to Scott in mid-December of last year, and in kind of a full panic, saying I wanted to apply in round 2. How could he help me with about 2-3 weeks left before deadlines? Wouldn't necessarily recommend that timeline, but as Scott mentioned, if you're sitting on this call right now and you haven't started yet, it still is possible. So yeah, reached out to Scott mid-December. with the intent of still applying to 5 schools by round 2. And so in that, worked with Scott for kind of on an accelerated timeline over 3 weeks to really get those applications ready to go by, those early January deadlines. And I would say kind of 3 main things emerged for me in terms of the value that Scott and his team really add. First off, and I think, this is something that you would likely see if you started the process as late as I did. I think there's a component of just really alleviating some of the stress around the process. When I was looking at this mound of applications that I had in the middle of December, I didn't even know where to start. I had written, half an essay here, half an essay there, but there was really no organized approach to how I was taking on this process. And so I think it's very tactical, and it might seem simple, but just setting you up on a process where you can tackle these applications in a very organized way and really make sure that the applications for each of your schools can be viewed in a holistic manner and really tell a consistent story throughout. So I would say that's point 1, and it may seem small, but for me it was a huge value add. I would say the second thing, in terms of goals, a lot of these schools will ask you, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And I had a pretty good idea about short-term goals. I intend to go back to consulting following. And while I had a sense of my long-term goals, I didn't really understand, the level of specificity that is important to a lot of these applications. And so Scott really helped me uncover, okay, here's what your long-term goal is, but what does that really mean in practice? How are you going to add value to these companies? What do you specifically see yourself doing in the role you've specified? And that was something that, I'd really never thought of. It's something 3-4 years down the line, or even 5 years down the line from now. And I hadn't taken the time to really dig into what my long-term goals meant in practice. And then I think the last thing, and Parker touched on this a little bit, I didn't have too many extracurriculars, and when sitting down to write my applications initially, I didn't really see a common theme that was kind of emerging throughout my application. And so Scott really helped me to uncover, what are some of the things that tie together my past experiences, both personal and professional, that I can lean on in these applications. And so for me, it ended up being a lot around teamwork and collaboration as a former collegiate athlete. And these were things that I didn't really necessarily see in my own experiences, but they were themes that Scott pointed out to me, and that we were really able to kind of weave through the whole application. So those are kind of my main 3 points that I would touch on. Happy to chat about, getting involved in the process late, developing your short and long-term goals, anything like that, happy to chat about. But yeah, at Wharton now, first year, was also admitted to Booth as well.
Great. Well, Jamie, thank you so much.
Okay, great. So now we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, and appreciate you sticking with us with some back and forth. I heard that video has been helpful for folks who've seen it in the past, and so wanted to just share that with you all now. Of course, if you're watching this live, we're not in the round 2 timing, but some of you will be watching this during round 2 timing as well. So I want to address one thing, because there were some comments that came up, and then we'll continue with the presentation. Some comments came up around scholarships and wanting this presentation to be about scholarships. Well, if we think of what happens when somebody gets a scholarship, right? I was actually just talking with an admissions director at an MBA fair in New York 2 nights ago about this. There are different components that go into evaluating folks for scholarships. One is the statistics, right? So getting a higher score. Obviously, we can help you with that if you want help. We have some of the best tutors in the industry, and we can help there. But you understand what that is. You get a higher test score, you're more likely to get scholarships. But then the other factors come in, the other components, the essays. How good are the essays? How well is the story packaged together? Are you coming across like somebody who will be a good community leader? And then the interview. What are you doing in the interview? Someone that told me recently, they really decided to give somebody a scholarship because of how strong their interview presence was, and otherwise they would not have done that. And so, when the question comes, how are we getting scholarships, and want to make sure that you're learning that from us, this is all part of that scholarship process, right? So if you do all these things well, if you perfect the whole process, then you're more likely to get scholarships. So as you package this theme, consider the role of these components, right? Resume, essays, and rec letters. And I'll go through this sort of quickly. If you want to watch it more slowly, feel free to pause this. A lot of people get bored with the slides, so I'm just going to sort of run through these on a faster timeline. So professional versus MBA resume, right? Professional resume sells you and your skills. You're applying to a job. You need to tell your boss that you can do the things that job wants you to do. A business school resume doesn't care about any individual skill that you have. It's more so what's the collective skills that you are bringing to the class. How well-rounded are you? Have you used these skills to influence people and to lead? If you are good at programming one language or 17 languages, probably doesn't matter for business school, right? It just matters what are you doing with these programming skill languages. And so the other thing is prove that you did your job a little bit better than somebody else. What does a resume look like? This is a template, right? Company, city, date. I won't waste more time on this. The only thing I'll say is 1 or 2 lines per bullet is good. You're not having a whole paragraph. It's not 4 or 5 lines. Never have a line that's a bullet that's less than 1 line. You don't want like a half a line for a bullet. It just shows that you haven't really tried, honestly, to tell your story. So key aspects of a strong resume: you want to highlight strengths, show leadership, specific results, and again, show that you've done the job better than someone else. I don't remember seeing a resume recently that hasn't needed edit. We say here only a few were great without needing to edit. Everybody's resume needs editing, and it's not because the resumes are bad. It's just because business school resumes are different than professional resumes. And so definitely make sure to have some time to change your resume before going to business school. And you don't have to throw everything on the resume. So unlike when you're applying for a job, they have your whole application. They have extracurriculars. They have the recommendation letters. They have the essays. So you don't need to put it all on one resume. No bolded words. No, multiple pages. If you're applying to a full-time program, 1 page, absolute hard limit, 1 page. If it's an executive program, you can go to a couple pages. So unless the school specifically says, we would like a 2-page resume, that's going to be a 1-page resume for you. So rec letters are important for scholarships because, again, if somebody really likes you and they tell the school that you're one of the best people that they've ever worked with, the school's more likely going to want to take you into their class just naturally. So your rec letter strategy, right? As somebody who's going to write an amazing letter, title and prestige doesn't matter. They want to write specific details that prove that you did the job better than someone else, and ask them early, right? And we can talk more about rec letters later, but things that are important: specificity, recency, honesty, and detail. So you want to ask somebody who will be able to talk about the things that you've done that are really good, will be able to say, hey, Scott was not good at these things. He blinks too much in a webinar. He, doesn't sound that good. Whatever things about that person is not good, write those. Obviously, those are silly examples, but the applicant should not be perfect. You don't want to be perfect applying to school. If you're perfect, then don't go to business school. Start a company. Let me know what it is, and I'll try to invest in you. You should have weaknesses, and the recommender should definitely be highlighting these weaknesses. So we'll talk briefly about essays. There's a process, some guiding principles. Write authentically, right? Answer the question that actually asked. Don't repeat yourself, right? You only have so many essays to write, and so try to go, from one to the next without repeating, yourself too much. These are some other examples from clients about how they use this process to secure sizable scholarships. And so we'll go over some of these success stories, and then we'll kind of close out. So here's somebody, obviously, good stats. And this one actually we just talked about, so we're going to skip that one. So here's one. So 3.4 GPA, 330 GRE. Numbers were pretty good. 4 years of experience in consulting. We had to kind of overcome some common background, average stats. We talked about specific interests in art and art galleries, really dug into the family history and connected the work experience to what she's done, and combined this throughout the entire process. And that got 150,000 here. Here's another example that I know we haven't heard before. 8 out of 10 GPA, high GMAT score, so that definitely helped. But only 3 years of work experience in banking, and so that was kind of overrepresented. Large, common background. We looked at a lot of these personal things as far as sport and personal interests and trains, actually, and tie those all together to have a really strong, cohesive story. I think that for here, what worked was honestly writing about something that someone else hadn't written about in the past. And in the interest of time, we'll go on to a little bit more about how we can help you. So for us, we always start with brainstorming, right? Talk about your goals. We'll have you do this little 200-word Personal MBA Coach goals essay to make sure that what you're writing is at the right level of detail, clarity, and specificity. It's realistic and achievable and ambitious all at the same time. We go through the story. This is a brief overview. If you want to learn more about what we do, feel free to reach out separately. We'll go into a longer 30-minute consultation where we can discuss what we do. And the consultations are used for people that are interested in hiring us for our services. Fortunately, since we are pretty busy with folks that want to hire us, we're not offering consultations unless you're planning on hiring us. But if you are, absolutely be happy to schedule time to chat. School selection, that's an important part of the process, right? Figuring out the right schools for you, especially when it comes to scholarships. One of the things that we can do for you is to just predict where you'll get money. Certain schools have larger budgets. Even within a similarly ranked school, you might have, let's say Kellogg has like a pretty big scholarship budget. MIT Sloan does not. Not that they don't give scholarships, they absolutely do. But, we tend to see more larger scholarships from a school like Kellogg. And so being able to, identify these things, and then for you, which schools likely to give scholarships for you. Now, you can get scholarships across all rounds. Round 1, 2, 3, any round is fine. Of course, earlier is better than later. They don't necessarily increase the budget as the months go on. So it is better to do it earlier, but we have seen success even off the wait list. Had an applicant where, so Norina, and there's a video with us and her somewhere on this GMAT Club YouTube channel, and she went to Yale, applied in round 3, was, I believe, waitlisted, and got a scholarship at the end of the day. So it can work out, and with a pretty low GMAT score, actually. So, figuring out the essays, right? Sending essay guides, showing you what each school is looking for and how that varies from school to school. If you want to learn more about this, we can chat offline because there are a lot of details that we can go into as far as what our process includes and how it is different maybe from what else is out there. But it's a very structured process. And we have a lot of accountability, a lot of checks, weekly internal meetings that we use to discuss clients and discuss processes. And then at the end, as Parker said, the mock interviews are super important. And so our team has people that used to interview at many of the top schools. And that way, who's helping you is somebody who actually used to do this. So that's a very, very quick overview. We'll go to questions, and this is a guide if you want to download. I know you probably can't click on this link, but the idea here is to show you that we have a lot of material that you can access. So visit personalmbacoach.com. For those of you that are listening to this and saying, I don't have any budget to hire you all, we have a lot of resources on our website. So feel free to, go on the website, download some guides if you're thinking about going with a consultant or not, watch other videos, download guides, essay analyses and things like that. But at this point, we'll go to questions. And feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like, and we'll start answering them. Okay, so there's a question from Grace about Parker's GMAT score. So the score was a 750. And had he already taken GMAT before you reached out to Scott in February? I don't think so. I have to go back to the exact timing of his tests, but I don't think so. I will say that more important than just one client, you absolutely do not need a score before starting. At this point in March, since obviously all of you are watching this live, and those of you watching it later, insert whatever month we're in at that point. Most people don't have a test score. I mean, the fortunate ones do, and that's great if you do. But most of our clients don't have a test score. You can still get started. What we do with folks that are getting started now is one of really two things. One, we help you to raise that score through tutoring. And if you sign up soon, before we'll get on a wait list, we can definitely help you. Second is we sort of triage, let's say, or prioritize the schools. So perhaps you're applying to 6 schools. 6 was the most common that we saw last year. You might know, okay, school 1 and 2, regardless of what happens, I'm going to be applying. And so you'll start with those essays. And a lot of the essay questions, we know what they'll be, or we don't think that they'll change. And so you can get started. And then as the months go on and you have more clarity with regard to your score, then you can add in, the other schools and maybe add in some higher schools or lower schools. So that's obviously strategy 1. Strategy 2 is you get the test completely and then you start working on your applications. And either one is fine. I prefer strategy 1 because you never know when you're going to get your score. We had a client a couple years ago, lovely client, became pretty good friends with her, who started with us in February. And I think we finished the essays like really early, but we didn't get the test score until December and just kept doing tutoring until she raised her score. And, she's graduating from a top M7 school this year. But, it took time to get there. But if she waited until mid-December to write the essays, obviously there wouldn't really be that much time. Okay. So let's see. So how does work experience affect the likelihood of getting a scholarship? Great question. Yeah, because I didn't actually really talk about that. So appreciate these smart questions here. Is more work experience generally better? So let me think about that. The fact that I have to think about that probably means it's not the most important thing, if I'm being honest. I mean, if you take a step back and think like the better applicants would be more likely to get scholarships, then maybe the better work experience, as far as better role and kind of progression and salary and that sort of thing, would help. As far as years, though, I would have to run a report. To be honest, I've never ran a report, and I'm a data guy, so now I'm curious, and I want to go and run this report through all my data. Does more work experience lead to a higher scholarship dollar? I don't know. Email me. I'm happy to look into that. But I haven't thought about that before. So since I haven't thought about it in 15 years, my guess is it probably doesn't really matter. It's really those other factors. It's a very good question, though. So here's a question: what's a take on age and full-time MBA? Do business schools pay particular attention to a person's age when considering admission and viability for their program? Is this a deal breaker? So to clarify, and this is a little bit semantics, to be honest, but schools are only legally allowed to evaluate work experience, years of work experience, and not age. Otherwise, it's age discrimination. Now, obviously, they're very correlated. Age does impact decisions, right? Because if a school has 80% of the people between call it 2 and 8 years of experience, they're not likely to take 75 people with more than 10 years of work experience. Now, do they take some people? Yes. The older you are, the more experienced you are, past the prime of 5 years, which is most schools, generally the harder it is to get accepted. Now, that said, a lot of rules around that get broken. We have clients, 8, 9 years of experience, even 10 or more, that get into school every year. I would say it's a very individual situation and strategy. And certain people can be very good with a lot of experience, and other folks, might not do as well. It just depends on their class, what they're looking to fill. What is the experience? What's the reason why you have a lot of experience? What are you looking to do going forward after the MBA? So it's a very good question. And at the same time, if you're young and you don't have a lot of experience, that also is harder. But one of my good friends from Wharton, she started with 1 year of experience. So literally finished college, did not do the deferred program, which for anyone looking at applying when you're in college, we do a ton of deferred work. So feel free to reach out. She didn't do that, just applied as soon as she, basically started working, and then started Wharton the next year with 1 year. And that's, pretty low. For those of you thinking about programs in Europe, we didn't talk as much about some of the European programs, but they are a little bit more flexible when it comes to age. So, looking at INSEAD or HEC Paris or IMD, these schools have not only the average age is a little higher, or average years of work experience, I should say, but the sort of like overall limit, let's say from lower to higher, tends to be a little bit wider. And the number of people along the way tend to be more evenly placed versus, if you look at Harvard Business School is probably the steepest, and I have a chart that I could share at some point. where 4.4 years, the number of people with 4 years is the highest, and then 5 years. By the time you get to 7 years, it's already down here, and then 10 or more years of experience, you're looking at usually about 20 people a year. And so the bell curve is a little bit more evenly distributed and flatter. But that's a good question. So I had some questions come about timing, schools this year, last year, COVID, the war, a lot of unfortunate things that are happening right now. And what I can say is, to be honest, like, we just don't know. I mean, I'll just be very frank. I can tell you what we have seen so far. And if you want to talk about your situation, feel free to reach out, personalmbacoach.com, and we can definitely have a conversation. But what we've seen so far is this current cycle that we're in, not quite as competitive as the last cycle. What this means for this year is sort of anybody's guess. It's correlated with the economy. So, as the economy is strong, it means fewer people want to leave their jobs, especially, just to call out India. I know there are a lot of folks in India watching this. We hear a lot of reports with people doing quite well. I mean, I'm invested in a number of startups in India, and salaries are rising and equity is rising. And so that sort of takes people away from applying to school. And so I think it's definitely not the most competitive year ever. But that said, we'll see what happens with the economy. If the economy does turn south further, that could impact jobs. And that could then lead more people to want to come back into the system and start applying to school. So, that's how I think about the application process. But a lot of people ask about timing and, when is the best time to apply? If you think about numbers, even if, I don't know, let's take Harvard. Harvard Business School has 1,000 more applicants that applied this year versus last year. You should be applying when it's the right time, for you, right? Because it's more important that you get your timing right than the timing of the application cycle. Because if you're strong and you don't want to, let's say if you think, oh, next year is going to be easier, let me wait, and then you get a year older, like, you'll hurt yourself more by waiting, right? Versus just applying now. So hopefully that makes sense. So here's a question: is there anything specific that business schools look at in the essay to give a scholarship? If yes, can you tell some key points? So there's not really one specific thing that they look for in essays, but I'll talk about some of the things that make a strong candidate that's more likely to get scholarships from a school. For one thing, let's take a step back and think about what is this process, right? It's this weird process where there's a price of an offering, price of a service, and you're applying to go to pay that price, but all of a sudden you might pay something less. That doesn't happen at the movies. You don't have a $15 movie ticket and then walk up and they say, you can only pay $5. So the whole process is kind of strange to begin with. So they're looking at, right, who's going to actually come. They only have a certain amount of money. And let's use the movie theater example, where the movie theater wants to bring people into the theater because a full theater leads to better movie ratings. And they have $100 to give. And they can go up to people on the street who are waiting in line for something. Say it's movie theaters, say it's a carnival, and they might go to the movies, they might go to the carnival. If they give the first 4 people $25, what if they don't go to the movies, right? Then they've lost all their money and nobody came to the movies. So similar to scholarships, they want to give it to people that are more likely to go. So if you have somebody in the line for the movies that's wearing the t-shirt of the movie that's coming out, well, they're more likely to go to that movie. So let's give them money because I think they're actually going to come. Kind of a weird analogy. I guess I'm in an interesting mood today. Similarly for scholarships, if you show them that you're interested in the school, if you demonstrate that passion, if your essay for why you want to go to, I don't know, take, Columbia, for instance, or, Booth or whatever, is super specific and super strong, and somebody reading it just knows, hey, this person would be great on campus. They've demonstrated that they know the school. They've demonstrated that they actually want to come. I can see the thought process. I think if I give them money, they're more likely to take it. That's helpful, because the last thing schools want is to give people a bunch of money and then have them just not go. Then it's budget that they haven't used, And that's why sometimes there's still money left in round 3. So it was a long-winded answer, but that's one thing. And the next, it's just the overall strength of the essay. How good is it, basically? Can we conclude that if an applicant has a higher GMAT scores, better resume, and recommendation letters, he or she is more likely to get the scholarships regardless of nationality? Great question. So overall, the first part of it is definitely true. I wouldn't say regardless of nationality, though, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky and dicey, because schools want well-rounded classes, and they do need to have a diverse group of students so that everybody can learn from everybody else. And they can't, let's say if for whatever reason, if the most qualified, people in the class all came from one particular town where a robot created them. And just to give a silly example, so I don't insult anybody, a robot creates this 100 perfect people from this town. They can't give them all scholarships and use up all their scholarship money on this one town, because then it won't be the most diverse class. So just like schools want diverse classes, they also are awarding scholarships across a variety of different people so that they can get the best people in from the different regions and groups that they want from. There's not an exact science, but that's a good point. You said, some schools have set limits and scholarships for each region. Nationality, is that common in top business schools? So I don't know of any set, dollar number per country necessarily. I think that it all just comes out in the wash. And to be honest, you might be surprised. I learned this when I hired my most recent M7 admissions director, that I asked a lot of questions around, this happens here, we do this analysis here, I look at these results, what do you think? And I was told we actually do more analysis than maybe is sort of common in some ways. So I mean, as you think about it, right, schools are very busy, and they have a lot to do, but it's not easy to say this is an exact technical way of looking at something. So one year, maybe, there's some great candidates from country X, and so they give them an extra $200,000 scholarship. It's not like there's an exact number per region. At least I've not heard of that before. Is high GMAT score the main decision maker for getting a scholarship? So it is very important. It is very, very important. I would say if there's one thing that is going to impact things the most, it probably is the test score. But it's definitely more than just the test score, right? It's the whole process. What kind of a student will you be? How will you improve the curriculum on campus? What can you give back to the class? So really, the way I try to simplify it is application strength and test score, and that's what's going to makes kind of, if you think about sort of a signing bonus for jobs, back when signing bonuses happen to try to get somebody, whereas now they just happen. It used to be the best candidates will get a signing bonus so that we can take them. Way back in the day, before probably any of us were working, that's what a signing bonus came from. It was let's try to get somebody really good, give them a bonus to sign on. And now it's just schools that do it, everybody kind of gets a signing bonus, or rather jobs that do it. So that's sort of how it works in schools. And you can definitely do a lot to try to get different money from different schools. And only so much I'll say, that's public channel, but there are strategies for trying to raise the scholarship figures even once you've been awarded it. And that's going to vary drastically by school. And you want to make sure to not do something that you're not supposed to do for that school. But there's definitely a big strategy here. And the good news is there's more and more money out there. So there was a concern when COVID first came, and there's all these reports around school budgets and so is making less money from all these reasons. How's that going to impact scholarships? We have not seen any impact at all, and I don't foresee any impact kind of coming. Would you advise focusing your energy on one or two applications, or spread it across the more schools to widen your chances of acceptance? So our average client does 6 schools. 90% of people are in the 5 to 7 school range. I do not advise just doing 1 or 2. The whole process is risky, right? We don't know what's going to happen, who's going to accept whom. It's really tough to know what's going to happen at the end of the day. And especially if you're here and you're watching this today, it's March, you have tons of time. So I would say at least 5, 6, 7 schools. And that way you can really maximize your chances, because it really just is tough to predict, exactly what any one particular school will say to you. We have clients that, we had 6 people get into Stanford in round one that got invited to interview and was actually doing the interview for round 2. And, some of these Stanford admits didn't get into, 2 or 3 of their other top schools, right? But then Stanford, well, that's weird because Stanford's the hardest school. Different things happen. It's certainly a random process. And so you want to have enough schools so that you can maximize your chances of getting in. And we find, 5, 6, 7 tends to be a good number. Would I say that schools that don't require GMATs are as good as the schools that do, especially in Canada? That's a little bit of a complicated question. So I don't know that I would say blanket statement like schools that, require GMATs are better than those that don't, or there's no correlation. I think there's some correlation, but then there are a lot of schools that are breaking those rules by, waiving GMATs. So that's definitely going to have to be evaluated on a school by school basis, because some schools just have decided they don't require the GMAT as a way to evaluate you and have looked at other reasons. As far as trying to correlate that with ranking, I might look, back in time to see what has been the GMAT rule for the last 10 years. And that would give you a bit more of an indication as to ranking. Meaning, if the school has not required GMAT for the last 10 years and all their peer schools have, that might mean something about their overall ranking and prestige. But in the last few years, a lot of schools just started to, waive the GMAT. I just got rejected by Cornell Johnson. I was asked to reapply next year. Do you think I have a chance of getting in? Applied without a consultant, and maybe I might come to you for help. Well, thanks for saying that. We'd love to talk to you about how we can help you. We have a lot of reapplicants. It's, unfortunately that time of year when not everybody gets in, and you put a lot of hard work and you want to do your best. If you were advised, you were asked to reapply, then that's a good, if the school told you to reapply, I think that's good. And is there a chance? We would have to look at your situation. So happy to talk offline. It's hard to do that in a forum like this, but feel free to send an email. I'm happy to evaluate, and very blunt would say what the chances are, whether it's realistic, do you have the right range of schools and that sort of thing. So we're almost about closing out. If anybody has any other comments, feel free to ask. I hope to meet all of you very soon. Events are starting. We're doing different MBA fairs and tours, and so I was in New York a couple nights ago. So we're now starting to get on the road again after a couple years of sitting in my basement, which is as exciting as it looks. And wishing everybody the best of luck. So much fun to interact with all of you. If you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, feel free to reach out and let me know. And if anybody has any interest in working with us, just shoot me an email or visit our website, personalmbacoach.com. But Abhijay and the whole GMAT Club, really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to GMAT Club's YouTube channel if you have not. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Personal MBA Coach, and reach out if you want to explore what we do. Thank you so much, everybody. Best of luck.